Morpheus.Network is actually a Canadian company. We're founded in Toronto. The two co-founders are from there. But we have our roots very firmly in what is now known as USMCA, now United States, Mexico, Canada. I've been living in Mexico for the last 28 years. So we have maybe a unique, I would say, understanding of some of those cross-border challenges in that USMCA area, which I'll talk about in my presentation. Okay, so I'm just going to kick off my deck. Just let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, all good.
All good? Right. So let's get started. So, we're talking about cross-border and supply chain, and really we're talking about the digitization journey. So everyone's seen this graph before. The global exports have obviously grown, quadrupled in 25 years, $25 trillion. In fact, in the NAFTA area, it's gone higher than that. I think it's like 6, 7, 8 times, depending on the flow of goods. Obviously, there's been some hiccups along the road, the financial crisis, the trade wars, but no one was really prepared with what happened next, right? This black swan event, no one predicted it, but worse still, no one was actually prepared for it in global supply chains. And really, that's caused us a lot of problems. So everyone's probably familiar, at least from a supply chain perspective, this complex flow of goods going from a shipper, exporter to an importer, a buyer, consignee, consignor. Typically you might have maybe 10, 12 different stakeholders in that flow. Obviously that's ripe then for some kind of automation. But what you've seen thus far, those 25 years of global trade is still very silo-based. Everyone has a common platform. Sorry, everyone has their own platform, their own processes, their own communication tools, and there's no real business process automation, what John was talking about, in order to hook data and documents from one step to another. Now, a lot of the supply chain problems we're living now is really because the global purchasing managers really chose cost as their business driver rather than resilience and risk. So what we're seeing, at least from the companies that we talk to, is obviously an accelerated digitization of supply chains, okay? A focus around trusted suppliers and providers. So, maybe that's like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 providers to the auto OEMs. So how do we share documents and data? And that's where, again, I think baseline can obviously help significantly in how we share key data points between people on the supply chains. The third point would then be a focus around supply chain metrics, specifically those around inventory and ETA. This is really your new currency of success. So, if you remember, we go back to this slide. Let me just go back one. Okay, the house of cards, the global OEMs, the supply chain parts provider, the tier 3 in China, they stopped producing parts in February. The production lines were shut down by the end of February for the auto industry. If it's like fruit or, the farm laborers in the United Kingdom, no one was there to pick the fruit. It was just left to rot in many cases. And then also the meat packaging, the USA. So when COVID hit, then obviously a lot of the workers unfortunately got, contaminated with this kind of disease. And obviously then some of the supply chains there have stopped working. So when we're trying to improve it, we have to think about resilience. Now, our supply chain journey starts in Canada with Federated Co-op, an $8 billion company, and they wanted us to implement the Safe Food for Canada Act from 2019. Now, they talked to some big companies, people like IBM. They couldn't really develop a solution fast enough and quick enough. And what we ended up building was a simple document manager using our platform on blockchain that allows 150 global suppliers then to upload their regulatory docs, their certifications, so they can be validated by FCL. So again, going back to some of the rules that John was talking about, what are we kind of trying to automating here? Well, it's, eliminating tens of thousands, literally tens of thousands of emails that go backwards and forwards in this company that don't have any timestamps, any date stamps, any kind of feel of whether they're actually valid documents. There was no approvals process apart from manual. So we replaced that with a document manager using our platform within 45 days. Now, the second customer case I just want to talk about as an illustration of cross-border trade is a Fortune 100 drinks company. So for argument's sake, we'll say this is a tequila company based in Mexico. I know it's a product that most people, love to enjoy, and they're exporting that to the US. So I'm just going to take you through, again, some of the steps that we had here. Now, some of their unique challenges in that particular company were around, one, creating the right regulatory docs, very similar to FCL. In fact, they have 25 different documents in order to back up and then, expedite a shipment from beginning to end. So here's what we call as a typical shipping contract on our platform. This is going obviously from Mexico to the United States, okay? Country of origin, country of destination. Here we're listing out the SKUs, the descriptions, obviously the HS code, critical for like cross-border trade. And then we get a total. Now, we're middleware. We're into the business process automation, but we're middleware. So, if you had SAP, we don't want you to actually rekey this data. And if you didn't have an ERP, maybe you could import using a CSV file or actually add the data in one of our catalogs. So we really think we should digitize the data at source to avoid all that manual rekeying and manual efforts and obviously error entries in the supply chain process. Now, when you save the contract, what it will take you to is this workflow builder. And this is really the core of our platform. Remember, business process automation. So one of the key activities any global exporter does is, they're going to collate their IMEX documents, the pre-documentation. It could have been a certificate of origin. In fact, July 1st, this one's not required anymore. It could be certificates of exports, the sanitary documents, okay? And you're going to define who you want to request those from. Some of your providers may be small companies, the SMEs, some of them might be larger companies. We cater for all their needs. So the next step maybe then is requesting assets. So we can, containers, trucks, for example, and then assigning container IDs or VIN numbers to those loads in order to just expedite the supply chain. We also create our own bill of lading from the platforms. This is a straight bill of lading, and I'll go through an example in a minute, and integrate IoT. So one of the key things we do is bring IoT data, from the cloud into the platform and make it actionable. So here's one of our cold train triggers. Okay, from 1 to 9 degrees. And I also could create a geofence around destination. So actually here we have the El Paso Customs Bridge. So this is the crossing from Mexico to the US. And I'm going to create a notification then when my load's actually arrived and when it's crossed customs, so I know it's on the way to the DC. Now, Jim will be talking very soon about one of the new modules we've been building and testing, which is around the release process. So remember, Eric was talking about the ACE platform, the single window for importing into the United States. So we've actually created an interface in order to talk to the ACE platform. So we can use some of our digital data. So let's just go in an example. We go into our bill of lading module. So here you're seeing, again, destination, origin, products, remember that tequila. So we're using this information and writing it to the ACE platform in order to create an electronic entry. Okay, so Jim will be talking about that in a minute. Normally we finish our process off with a proof of delivery. That's where supply chain usually ends. And then the processes of finance, collections, account receivable start. Or it could be a report coming off the WM. Okay, so what happens when we start our platform? So if we start workflow, it's going to start sending their messages. So one of the key things we wanted to do was eliminate email. So users receive then requests for documents very much focused around jobs to be done. So here we need to upload a pickup document, the transport confirmation. I can see the notes on here. I can upload the document. And I can see very specifically which purchase order or which shipment that was linked to. So one interface for uploading, all the documentation per user. Now that information then will get sent to a supervisor, okay, and they have a slightly different interface. Their challenge then is to see all the documents and approve them. Okay, so you can see on this side, you have documents that have been previously approved, but let's just go in and click in a couple of examples. So we might have an IMEX document. Let's look at this one, for example. This is pending. Okay, so here's a document that was submitted. And what I can do then is go and click in, have a look in more detail at that document, see that it's actually completely correct, and then go ahead and approve it. So that means that the document's been added to the workflow and then pushed out to the blockchain so it can be shared with those counterparties. Okay, so that's really a key part of our platform. Another tool that we have, I think is quite simple to use, is our dashboard for POs and shipments. So here you can start looking at the purchase order numbers, the workflows, and start dates. Remember that ETA, that new currency of success. When is our product going to arrive? When's that inventory going to be made, that was like parts and sub-assemblies into finished goods? Or if it's the food chain, food packaging into final consumer goods. And I know exactly what module step I'm at, where it was completed, and then if there's any pending activity from my team. And that's obviously all traffic related, and I'm like measuring the days. Now we push some of this data out, obviously, to what we call a digital footprint. So here specifically is that digital footprint. This is what we call the Amazon view. It's that single view of the shipment from end to end. Again, usually we start by the purchase order. You saw here we added some of the key documents. Here's the nutritional information, for example. You can see that actually tequila does have a tiny bit of protein. You see obviously some of the product packaging. Depending on the country, this is actually mandatory to be added to the shipment, especially for food safety. Your interaction with carriers around their assets, and we go down to a very granular level. We can go down to VIN numbers or container IDs, and even to the driver. So one of the key things that we were talking about maybe in the preface for this call was around CTPAT, the security certificate around for the United States. 54% of the goods going into the United States is now covered by CTPAT security. And our platform actually helps the CTPAT compliance, specifically on sections 5 and 7. And then companies that have that can use our platform then to drive optimizations. We also, remember we talked about IoT, so we'd like to bring IoT into the platform, make it actionable. And again, we can push that out to blockchain to make it trustable. Again, really key if you're looking at maybe insurance events in the cold chain. Who's responsible? Is there a reorder process? So based on the data we pick up and that we're pushing out to blockchain, then we can run business rules in order to remedy those actions. Okay. So I just want to go back to my presentation and then I'll continue and we'll talk a little bit about dashboards. So, we can export our data. Obviously it's coming from counterparties, it's trusted, and then we can build these common data points, these KPIs that can be shared, between maybe some of the different actors in the supply chain. So here's one around time in process by different activities, for example, all the way through to a proof of delivery on October the 27th, and then document rework. This is really key for analyzing the efficiency and effectiveness of your team. If we talk a little bit about the benefits, a lot of companies come to us specifically to improve their OPEX or reduce OPEX. That end-to-end visibility, reducing that compliance overhead, reducing costs or over costs around SLAs, rework, reverse logistics, and obviously having a more effective team. We can also improve SLAs. So that is downstream. Maybe it's actually in the retail environment or the distribution environment, fill rates. We can also reduce losses around product damage, shrinkage, waste and counterfeiting. And finally, we can also improve the working capital, anything linked to your balance sheet. Real-time inventory coming from IoT, reliable ETAs, and a real proof of delivery, electronic proof delivery, improves accounts receivable. And if we focus around ETAs, we can improve plant planning, utilization, and we can also incorporate some sustainability metrics. We actually plan for getting product from A to B, and then we're not kind of doing it at the last minute on an airplane, which is for the carbon footprint, usually a big difference and big impact on the environment. Some of the technology partners that we're already working through to ease your deployment. So, you saw our SAP interface. We're working with companies like IBM and SDocs, obviously telco and IoT, to bring in that IoT data, and then obviously different cloud providers. We should also mention that, we're blockchain agnostic, but we're very, very excited about the possibilities of Baseline and how we could share then some of these key data points with some of these counterparties. I think Jim's going to talk about that in a minute, but a couple of other cases could be, sharing information with your insurer around insurance events, and also maybe your bank if you're using trade finance. Okay. One of our other customers in Argentina is actually Argentina's leading pet food company, and it's called Vital Can. And yeah, that's really what I wanted to say in terms of my presentation. I hope it's been useful, and I hope you've got some great questions for the team later.